Welcome, everyone, to another episode of A Principles Voices. I'm Larry Johnson. I'm your host and founder of the A Principles. I'm delighted to have as my guest today Gavin Findlay, who is the CEO of New Zealand Food Network. Welcome, Gavin.
Great to be here, Larry. Great to enjoy your company.
Well, this is kind of a very much a long distance connection. You're coming at me from Auckland, New Zealand. It's a long way from Boise, but I was very fascinated when we spoke before about your organization, the fact that it's a food. Well, I'll let you describe it. It's a network, but it's not a food pantry or anything like that. It's something a lot more sophisticated and much larger scale. But can you tell me a little bit about how you came to be involved with this and why you continue to do it?
It's a bit of a roundabout story, Larry, if you don't mind. I mean, I was an ex-Air Force officer and spent many years in the travel and tourism and aviation industries, and was kind of at a bit of a lull in kind of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And so I was speaking to a good friend of mine who runs a recruitment, a very high level kind of recruitment and search agency, just to get his view of kind of where I should go. And he said, "Oh, I've got something that's just come across my desk recently, and we're doing some pro bono work to recruit the CEO of a charity." And I kind of cocked my head a little bit and said, "What do you mean, a CEO of a charity?" He said, "Oh, it's a food charity called Kiwi Harvest." Now, the building I was working in, this organization was actually housed in our car park in some porta cabins and some shipping containers. And I kind of didn't really know what it was all about. I said, "Oh, really?" I'd never been in food. I'd never been in the charitable space, although I'd done a lot of charitable work in my time. I'd never been at sea level. He said, "Look, don't worry, Gavin. I know who you are. I know what they're looking for, and I think you'd be a great fit." So through the kind of recruitment process, I was given the gig, and I was, appointed as CEO of Kiwi Harvest. One of the remits of Kiwi Harvest from the board chair when I came on board was to look at a national solution for some of the very large food wastage and food surplus there was in our system down here in New Zealand, that most of it was going off to landfill because nobody could take those bulk volumes. And then COVID hit, and we basically knew that there was going to be excuse my language, a real shit show in terms of people needing food support. So we went to government and said, "You need to support and help us." We put together this whole organization in 12 short weeks, and here we are 4 years later. So completely different to my background, completely different ethos in terms of how you view the world. But it's been a fantastic challenge, and still really enjoying it.
Well, so I love your expression. First at sea level. As an aviator, you've always been up here, and I really
Yes, yes,
I caught I caught that. So can you explain to us exactly what the work is that? Oh, well, first of all, you said Kiwi Network,
Kiwi Harvest.
Kiwi
So
Harvest,
Kiwi Harvest,
and now you're
yeah,
New Zealand Food
Kiwi
Network.
Harvest. Yeah, well, Kiwi Harvest was at the time New Zealand's largest standard food rescue and redistribution charity. Think City Harvest New York, Feeding America. There's a number of great organizations across the States, and Kiwi Harvest is that equivalent in New Zealand, mainly working on local food rescue and redistribution. So you've got the environmental aspects of avoiding food going to landfill, which is very degrading from a greenhouse gas perspective. And you've got the social aspect of individuals and families really struggling to put food on their table. New Zealand Food Network really kind of sits above that. We're the super wholesaler, for want of a better word, where we're working at very large volumes. For example, just yesterday, we've received 176 pallets of product from it's a high nutritious density milk powder for youngsters between the ages of 4 and 12. 176 pallets of that, so that's nearly 70 tons of product, 66,000 cans. That product didn't have a home because it was rejected. It was an export reject for whatever reason, and the organization had to get rid of it because they couldn't sell it. So we are now a natural outlet for that sort of issue within the food supply chain, and we're able to take that. So it's 100, it's a significant amount of product, and then we can put that into the community where it's really very well needed.
So you must have a pretty sophisticated housing, inventory, and distribution system.
When you set up an organization in 12 weeks, it's you don't have the luxury or time to really develop, intensely robust and fit for purpose kind of system. So we've been going along. We're actually currently, as it's a good question you asked. We're actually currently reviewing now a wee fit for purpose in terms of that systemization of the workflow of our product through our system. We may be a charity, Larry, but the connotations, I think I may have said to you before, we don't use the words not for profit in our organization. We use the words for purpose.
Ooh.
We're a for purpose.
I just used that this morning, Gavin.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say it, for purpose. I love that. Say it again, everyone can hear it.
Yeah, so we are a for-purpose organization that runs profitably. We have to be profitable in order to continue doing and reinvesting and continue, like any commercial entity. But all our profits, per se, go back for our purpose. So it's, we run very commercially, and we are reviewing now how the workflow goes through our system. We've moved into a new warehouse. Now I can't remember what the conversion rates are from square meterage to square foot, but it's not a massive place by kind of American standards. I think it's maybe it's 1,500 square meters or just under 2,000 square meters. So it's maybe 20,000 square feet. I'm not sure. But that's really right size fitting for us to get our product in, because we move quickly. We move our product in and out of our warehouse. We don't hold a lot of product. It's very much needed. So
who are the recipients of the food? Who does it go to?
Yeah, well, we've got about 65 dedicated partners up and down the country, from in a bit of a geographic lesson for you, Invercargill down in the south of New Zealand, right up to Kerry way up in the North Island. Just for context, New Zealand's about the same physical size as the United Kingdom. They've got about 60 million people. We've got 5.5 million people. So we've got vast swathes of our country are quite remote, and that can be challenging to support those communities. So yeah, we've got about 65 dedicated, we call them food hubs, partner organizations who can handle the palletized product that we send out to them. They then distribute into the local community, either to smaller organizations who deal direct with the public or direct with the public itself. So kind of a hub and spoke, spider's web, whatever you want to call it. So very quickly, we can reach 1,500 organizations right at the front line and dealing with trying to create more food security and addressing food insecurity throughout the whole country.
So you deal both in non-perishable and perishable items?
Absolutely. So the perishable produce, pretty well known fact that about 30% of all produce grown never reaches the market. Never, for whatever reason. Without a word of a lie, this is what happened 4 weeks after I joined the Kiwi Harvest organization. We had 2 bins of carrots received from a supplier looked really great, fantastic. They were too orange to be sold in the supermarket.
Oh, it reminds me of
Too
something
orange.
I learned a number of years ago. I don't know if they do this in New Zealand, but one of the things they do here is they will wax fruit to give it that gloss that it doesn't naturally have, like apples. They'll wax these things. And the other thing they do is pork in its natural state is gray, but
Mm.
American consumers won't buy it that way. They think something's wrong with it. So they inject it with red dye. So it will be red, which I think is just like mind-numbing. Now,
It is a bit crazy, and I've kind of learned a few home truths or bust a few myths since joining. And many people, when I first came on, I was probably one of them. Oh, it's the supermarkets. They only do this, they only do that. The reality, Larry, a supermarket will only put something on its shelf that you and I will buy.
correct.
It's got no other remit.
No,
It will put anything. It would put a bag of rubbish on the shelf
maybe it'll
if a
sell.
consumer would buy it.
Yeah,
So when they go in and they look and see on their produce area, they see the two-headed carrot or the blemished apple or the banana that's got a few little black spots on it sitting there and nobody's going to buy it. Why would you continue to do that if nobody's going to buy it?
it's just waste.
So,
Just waste.
so it's the consumer driving that to an
Mm.
extent. I was fortunate enough to. New Zealand's very very good at growing apples, and some of the sophistication around these processing factories that they every apple has a little pocket that goes through the whole production system, and it's the very first thing. One of the first things it does after getting washed is it gets 13 photographs taken of it as it's going through the camera bank, and it's turning the apple all the way around. And those 13 photographs are then analysed for colour, size, and deformities. And as it's going through the processing line, it gets dropped out into various areas and rejects. A very good, you know, crop will yield 85 to 90% of good product, but then you've still got 10 to 15, and that's a very good crop. You've still got 10 to 15% that's rejected. So yeah, we in the produce side of things, there's a lot more that we could still do. There's some really great work being done by a fantastic organization called Laket in Israel around working with farmers to analyze their yield on the field and versus their projected sale, so that you can maybe harvest that surplus at the time it's, rather than trying to go in and get it, if it's being left on the field or left on the vine or left on
After the
the
fact.
thing. So there's a lot of options there, and we can still utilize a lot of this surplus waste product.
Do you do either dairy or meats?
Absolutely, yeah. We're a key partner, a key community partner for Fonterra, which I think is the fourth largest dairy company in the world,
Mhm.
here in New Zealand. So yes, I mean, ranging from milk powder to lots of the branded yogurts and cheeses and milk derivatives. Um, Protein's an interesting one, Larry, because from a selling perspective, you can just freeze it down, and then you've got a couple of years to
Yes.
do it. So in terms of surplus, I prefer to use the surplus than waste. The waste word is really only when it's never used for human consumption.
Mhm.
It's then it becomes waste.
Yeah.
So everything before there is all surplus. So if you have surplus meat production, you just freeze it down, and then you get a secondary market for that to try and get some value out of it.
I see.
So
Okay. So you
um,
don't see as much of that because of the secondary.
don't see as much of that. The most of the meat that we would see would be at the retail end when it's coming towards its shelf life.
Yeah.
Then you can freeze it down, and you've got a quite period of time before you can put it back into the community.
Okay. All right. This is fascinating. So How many employees do you have? How big of an operation are we talking about here?
We've got a two-site operation, mainly one main one in the North Island, where we've got 23 staff up here, and we've got a satellite warehouse down in Christchurch, down in the South Island. We've got three staff that run that down there. But it's predominantly about 85-15 split between the North Island of New Zealand and the South Island in terms of our distribution efforts.
So, what's your funding model? How do you generate revenue?
Fortunately, at the moment, we're 95% funded through the government, federally funded, because, as I say, we needed to be set up in 12 weeks, and you don't suddenly, especially at that time that COVID was hitting,
Yes.
to kind of raise some funds for the amount of that was required to set this organisation up. But more and more now that we are engaging, mainly with our corporate partners.
Mm-hmm.
One of and it's great to kind of look at your principles, your methodologies, and understanding of where one can generate revenue for our sort of activity, because who knows whether any new government or any current government would continue to support at the level that we are. We're currently funded through for another 15 months. So yes, that's where we are at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not to say that's where we will continue to always be.
Well, government gives, government taketh away. And
yes, however, if you really, I'm a great believer, if you really show value, you really show impact, it's much more palatable for a government to continue supporting an organisation that is actually achieving the results that you want. I am cognizant that if they don't care about the results, then why would they fund you? But in my view, humans, they only need three things to survive: food, air, and water.
It's true. That's true.
Without any one of those, it's really challenging to live.
Well, I did say that you do have quite a potential for philanthropy, though. I think you really do. The most renewable, flexible money comes from individuals, and I guess I'm a little more cynical at this end, at the American end, about governments doing rational things. Sometimes they do things for some pretty bizarre reasons. Especially if you're near an election or something else is going on, or weird things happen. Where would you like to take this?
Continue doing our BAU really well, which is rescuing surplus food and putting it into community. But we've got a number of areas that we'd like to kind of really explore and develop, and in no particular order. Upcycling. So upcycling is where you can take a product that's been manufactured, developed, or grown, but there's quite a big surplus of that individual item that, from a raw state that it's in, for example, we had 7 weeks where over those 7 weeks, we were given about 85 tons of tomatoes. So our community, by the 5th and 6th weeks, as much as the community is hungry, more raw tomatoes. So, but soups, sauces, and pastas, raw tomatoes are the base ingredient for all those, which then can have a longer shelf life and can be more flexible and diverse for an individual and families to use. So we're exploring that with a few partners. We've got a great partner in Rescued Kitchen who are doing great things with bread. Bread is the single most surplus product in New Zealand, and I would say probably anywhere. They're taking that, freeze drying it down, creating bread flour that then can be used in baking mixes. So it's a great way of looking at things. There's great things that you can do with lots of byproduct, lemons and citrus fruits, dry that down, and then that's a real raw ingredient for pectin, which is a product used throughout a lot of the industry.
Yes.
So we're looking at ways that, as well as the raw ingredients, the raw product, how can we upcycle or recycle product in there? We're also looking at creating a low-cost, affordable food platform where, because of what we do in the community that we service, creating a network of food suppliers who have got a mind to either be very philanthropic in the pricing that they give us, and we can pass that straight through to the community, because we are a logistics company. We move goods from A to B. That's what our funding's for. If we can put no margin on top, then the end user's got access to low-cost, affordable food. Being mindful not to be in competition with that supplier who has to be in business and has to be commercial. So we're working through that really, really well.
So I'm a question I just want answered. So what's the best skill? Well, let me rephrase that. What's the most productive skill that you, as a former Top Gun, bring to this food thing? I mean, military fighter pilot running a charity.
Well, I'll just clarify, Larry. I wasn't quite the guy in the hot seat, shooting down the bad guys. I was the guy behind the scenes telling them where to go. So, I say, if you ever see the original Top Gun,
yes,
and the guy who's got the earphones on going, Maverick, you've got bandits on your six. That was kind of the role that I performed, amongst others, in there. Right. So what skill sets? I think one of the mantras that a couple of mantras that most military have is planning. Plan. But with the absolute knowledge that plan rarely survives first contact with the enemy. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that we go into battle every day with an enemy,
but in some ways you are.
But that flexibility, that absolutely have really good, robust processes throughout your whole organization. But when somebody phones you up and says, Gavin, I've got 75 pallets of such and such, can you take them? And they've got an expiry date in 4 days' time. Absolutely. You've got to have that flexible. I think during the, it might have been Storm and Norman, that General Norman Schwarzkopf that coined the phrase. I could be wrong here. But flexibility is the key to air power, was a mantra that we had during, kind of the Gulf War. And that is really one of the cultural inherents that I try and drive through the organization, is be very focused on good, safe, and productive process, but at the same time be ready for anything, because that can and will happen.
All right. I like that. I like that very much. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to add?
I just think that throughout the world at the moment, there's a real. I think we're at a kind of a real tipping point in the general capitalism economic environment that, many people say the divide between the rich and the poor is getting wider and wider and wider. And that is generally true, because the environment allows that to happen. I am not an advocate at all for draconian communism where, everybody's the same and everybody gets access to. I'm certainly not an advocate for that. I do like some of the work that's being done for the likes of the Pledge, where many senior, very wealthy people are trying to give back. But I do think there is sometimes a blind eye turned to those that really, really struggle in the community. For most of them, for reasons out with their control. We all know that there are those in society that really just couldn't give a hoot, don't want to contribute, don't want to be part of that, and that's unfortunate. But I think in general, be recognizing that there are those that will struggle, have struggled, will always struggle, and do what you can to help them get out as much as you can within yourself, whether you're representing an organization or representing an individual. There's a rugby is the national game down here in New Zealand, as we previously noted. And one of the rugby All Blacks greats, phenomenal guy called Sir Michael Jones, who kind of works in the similar field I am at the moment. He's very very faith based himself, and he was called the Iceman for a reason. He
I'm
was
sure he was.
as tough as you can come in, honestly. But with a little twinkle in his eye when he was asked, why are you so brutal on, the rugby field, Michael? He says, it's much better to give than to receive. And
I like that.
but philanthropically, he really adopts that off the rugby field as much as he does on the rugby field. And I found that myself, when you see the results of your actions and in the benefit of someone else, I don't think there's very much a better feeling than that. It's such an uplifting feeling, and that's what we're here for.
I tell people that I work with, there are lots of well-heeled people that will never give you anything. So just move on, because there are plenty of people who will. Focus on them. And oh yeah, I'm going to remember. That's another one you gave me. Much better to give than to receive. That's another thing I like. This has been delightful, Gavin. A really delightful conversation. And we're going to check back. I'm going to check back in again before long. We'll probably do another one of these about as you grow. I'd like to do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could not have told you that we would be here if you'd asked this 4 years ago. Okay. Because it's, you have and I think it's like most entrepreneurial startup type situations. You start with an idea, you've got an idea, you drive it towards it, but you generally don't really know where you're going to end up with that. Some crash and burn, and there's been a few ideas that we've had that haven't quite worked out, but in general, if you've got that mentality that what you're doing actually makes a difference, that really drives you on, because you are doing that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Everyone, I've been speaking with Gavin Findlay, who's the CEO of New Zealand Food Network in Auckland, New Zealand, a long way from me and a few hours, but it's been a delightful conversation. Join us again for another episode for someone who's doing very good work and perhaps in an unusual way. Thank you for tuning in.